Welcome back to the Job Site, fam. I'm Max Soul, your lead composer and chief engineer.
And I'm Mello Soul, your head of operations and vocal specialist.
That you are.
You're tuned into Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
And today we're auditing the ultimate load-bearing foundation of masculine vocal power. A man who didn't just sing ballads, he engineered an entirely new paradigm for the black male solo artist. We are deconstructing the life, the business, and the raw, unadulterated power of the one and the only Teddy Pendergrass.
Man, talking about Teddy is like talking about a vocal bulldozer.
He so was.
People hear that smooth late-night grit and think it's just natural charm, but Teddy was an absolute master of structural contrast. He was the heavy, raw concrete foundation that kept the Philly soul skyscraper anchored to the pavement.
Exactly, Mello. And to understand the material specs of his voice, well, you got to look at his apprenticeship, Mello. Teddy Pendergrass's journey into music was a raw, gritty, field-built project. Teddy wasn't a product of conservatory training or elite academy design either, Mello.
No, he was not. His foundation, Max, was forged through pure street-level grit, sanctuary frequencies, and backdoor mentorship. The true blueprint of how he developed his rhythm and found the right architects behind the curtain reveals a remarkable backstory.
It truly does, Mello. Teddy was completely self-taught by ear. He didn't read drum music off a music stand. He absorbed the rhythm from the floor planks up.
Before he played a note, the church was his infrastructure. His absolute earliest vocal training was in the Philadelphia church choir. He was so deeply plugged into the sanctuary that he was ordained a minister at just 10 years old.
That's right, they certainly did ordain him, but the church did not hand him drumsticks. The actual job site where he learned drums was a nightclub called Ciola's Supper Club in Philly.
Right, Max. His mother, Ida Geraldine Pendergrass, worked there cleaning dishes and scrubbing floors to keep the household running. And naturally, because Ida Pendergrass was raising Teddy as a single mother in North Philly,
well, Soul Fam, she couldn't just leave her young son home alone during late night hours. So, starting around the age of 11 or 12, Teddy went with her to the club almost every single night she worked.
So Teddy is waiting for his mother to finish her shifts, watching the bands back up the artists playing the club, and always watching the drummer.
Right, always. And we all know how that works. So before he even picked up a stick, Teddy spent months just sitting in the empty booths during the day and late night, watching the master house drummer back up legendary tour acts like Jackie Wilson, Fats Domino, and Bobby Darin. And one night, Mello, Teddy was about 11, and he saw the house drum sitting empty on the supper club stage. Ooh. With no formal teacher to learn from, he sneaked behind the drum kit and started to teach himself how to play by ear, mimicking the rhythms he heard coming from the radio in the church pews.
Exactly, Max. He had been running a visual audit of their grip, their posture, and how they kicked the bass drum. And once the club cleared out and the musicians left their gear on stage,
young Teddy started to figure out how to play the instrument. And the management and the house band, who knew Ida and respected her work ethic, well, they gave Teddy the green light to practice. So he starts every night he goes to work with his mom to practice on the house kit.
So while his mom was scrubbing the floors and wiping the tables down, Teddy spent hours behind that kit night after night working on his musical muscle memory.
It's an awesome opportunity. Learning by listening and increasing his drummer's vocabulary, Mello. Teddy was clocking in hours at Ciola's Supper Club for roughly 3 to 4 years during his early teens. And by the time he turned 15, well, that repetition turned a self-taught kid into a human clock. And when he dropped out of school to join the touring circuit, he didn't need a degree. He already had hundreds of hours of live stage testing under his belt.
And of course, while he sang in top-tier local choirs like the All-City School Choir and the Philadelphia Boys Choir.
What, you thought he'd stop singing when he learned the drums? He was still in church, you know. Boot camp, Soul Fam. He wasn't getting out of the church. But school?
School couldn't hold his interest, Max. And in the 11th grade, he finally just dropped out.
When Teddy dropped out of Thomas Edison High School in the 11th grade around 1968, well, he was immediately hired by a local Philadelphia chapter of the Cadillacs.
Not to be confused with the original 1950s Harlem Speedo group, though some legacy members drifted between lines, Max.
So Teddy Pendergrass was only 18 years old when he hopped on the tour bus. For a young, self-taught musician, this was an instant trial by fire in touring infrastructure.
The Cadillacs were an established vocal harmony group on the R&B circuit, Max. They didn't need a drummer who was flashy. They needed a human clock who could lock down a steady driving groove to support their choreographed stage presence.
Which Teddy could definitely deliver. And that starts the grind, Mello. For 2 years, Teddy traveled up and down the East Coast and mid-Atlantic states, playing multiple sets a night packed in smoky clubs. It was exhausting labor, but it hardened his internal metronome and gave him complete comfort on a professional stage.
And by late 1969 and early 1970, the boundaries of the local Philly scene began to cross, Max. The Cadillacs were sharing venues and bills with another struggling local vocal group, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes.
Right. And remember, Teddy wasn't singing yet.
No.
So everything happens for a reason, Soul Fam. Harold Melvin's backing band was going through a complete personal demolition and needed a new rhythm anchor. And Melvin had been watching from the wings, tracking Teddy's rock-solid pocket and aggressive energy behind the Cadillac's kit.
And in true form, in 1970, Harold Melvin essentially eventually poached the asset, convincing Teddy to jump ship and become the full-time touring drummer for the Blue Notes.
Are we sure Berry Gordy's not around here somewhere, Mello?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's a theme string we haven't seen yet. I don't know. Back to the story.
Indeed, Max. If it's there, we'll find it.
You bet.
So stay tuned, y'all. Where were we? So Teddy picked up his drum kit, changed his corporate alignment, and within less than a year, Harold Melvin would discover that his new drummer was actually carrying a skyscraper voice.
What a big surprise that was. And that's a great story, Mel. Mm-hmm. So by 1970, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes had been grinding on the circuit for nearly 15 years without a massive breakout national hit. They were respected. They stayed booked on regional package tours, but they were trapped in the independent Chitlin circuit floor plan.
And John Atkins, who was a phenomenal, smooth, traditional R&B lead singer, was feeling the stagnation, Max. He brought a solid, soulful delivery, but the records they were putting out on a small local labels just weren't catching fire.
Well, absolutely one of the pitfalls of the industry, Mello. The endless road grind with very little corporate financial payoff started to wear thin. And John Atkins was a veteran operator who had been doing the heavy lifting out front, but the group, it was essentially treading water, Mello.
Right, Max. And feeling that the group's trajectory had hit a permanent structural ceiling and tired of the unstable cash flow on the road, well, Atkins abruptly packed up his bags and quit the group in the middle of 1970.
Well, he surely did, Mel. He walked away to find a more stable, predictable lifestyle, completely unaware that his exit would trigger one of the biggest commercial booms in R&B history. Oh, my God, if you'd only known, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you go away thinking that way?
Exactly.
Right? Okay, the guy that replaced me became like the biggest. So Teddy had only been in the Blue Notes organization for less than a year, specifically really just a few months in 1970 when John abruptly packed his bags and said, see ya.
And because John Atkins walked out, Soul Fam, Harold Melvin was left with a massive lead vocal void right before their upcoming tour dates.
Uh-oh.
He didn't have time to hold open auditions across Philly. He had to run a quick inventory of the assets he already had on site.
Now, the Blue Notes were in a tight, sweaty Philadelphia rehearsal room trying to figure out how to patch the hole left by Atkins. And Teddy Pendergrass was sitting in the back like always, locked into his usual position, holding down the tempo on his drum kit, not singing.
To keep the rehearsal moving, the backing band was running through the instrumental tracks. Because there was no lead singer at the front mic, Teddy, just to keep the energy up and to maintain the cues for the other harmony singers, started singing Atkins' lead vocal parts right from behind his drum kit.
Holy shit, Batman, the drummer sings? No, he doesn't just sing.
He sangs.
He sangs.
Yeah.
Right? So Teddy started singing just to keep his time in place, and his voice leaked through the drum vocal mics. Mm-hmm. And as I said a second ago, he didn't just sing the notes. His raw, booming, gospel-laden baritone, well, it tore through the room with so much acoustic displacement that the entire band stopped playing mid-bar.
Harold Melvin stood there paralyzed, Max. He had hired Teddy strictly as a subcontractor for the rhythm section, completely blind to the fact that his drummer had possessed a voice that sounded like a tectonic plate shifting.
That's right. Well, no, Harold Melvin immediately made Teddy step out from behind the drums, handed him the main microphone, and redrafted the entire future of the Blue Notes on the spot. Harold Melvin was the contractor who gave him the first major platform, even if their financial partnership later fractured over corporate ledgers, which shit happens all the time with this.
And that's that rhythmic literacy right there. Teddy understood the pocket from the ground up. He wasn't just matching the melody, he was driving the tempo as well. And after hearing Teddy singing from behind the drum kit after their lead singer left, well, Max, he realized he had a vocal power plant sitting right behind the snare.
Yep, right on the snare. So on the spot upgrade. He promoted him to the front line, and between 1972 and 75, Teddy became the definitive voice for Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff's Philadelphia International Records. So when you listen to classics like If You Don't Know Me By Now or The Love I Lost, well, that's Teddy taking Gamble and Huff's lush, angelic strings and grounding them with street-level grit.
We're going to step into the isolation booth and do a complete technical audit on his specific vocal mechanics when we come back.
That's right. Keep your safety gear on. The foundation is about to shake. You're listening to right? And you're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. So before we break down the engineering behind Teddy's microphone placement, well, I got to remind you, if you like this content, please give a like and a subscribe to our channel.
And remember, there's the video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
All right, Mello. So Gamble and Huff originally wanted Marvin Jr. of the Dells to anchor their symphonic soul tracks, but he was locked up in a Chess Records contract. Well, when they heard Teddy, they realized they found something even better than what Marvin Jr. would bring to the table.
Yeah, Teddy Pendergrass's voice was a highly calibrated, high-octane engine, Max.
Oh, it sure as shit was, Mello.
He manipulated his vocal cords using techniques that few baritones ever mastered. And Gamble and Huff meticulously designed every track on albums like To Be True and Wake Up Everybody to exploit Teddy's unique high-octane grit filter vocal technique, turning him into a global marquee asset.
That's right, Mello. Before Teddy stepped up to the microphone, Philadelphia International Records were known for smooth, sophisticated, and polished deliveries of acts like the OJs and Billy Paul. And for Gamble and Huff, this left a grit void, which would be filled by Teddy. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Gamble and Huff had mastered symphonic soul, Max, the lush MFSB orchestra, the cascading violins, the pristine horn lines. However, they needed a contrasting element.
Indeed, they did, Mello. Gamble and Huff needed a vocalist who could bring the unpolished, sweaty, late-night church revival energy, or the grit, to balance out their high-end, clean studio tracking specs.
So when Teddy became the lead voice of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Gamble and Huff realized they didn't just have a singer. They had a structural catalyst. Huff's driving, syncopated piano lines and Gamble's socially conscious, deep lyrics found their perfect vehicle in Teddy.
Yeah, Teddy became the muse that defined the PIR sound of the mid-late 70s, as we mentioned last segment. The songs weren't just pitched to him, Mello. Gamble and Huff began drafting arrangements specifically just to see how Teddy's voice would tear through the instrumentation.
Which technically turned into a change in the vocal structure's signal chain.
Oh, I bet it did.
So let's get into the surgical specs of Teddy's vocal technique. Because the engineers at Sigma Studios literally had to rewrite the gain staging rules when this man walked into the room.
Yeah, his acoustic displacement was off the charts, Mello. Because he spent years as a heavy-hitting drummer, his core in his lungs were like a steam piston. And when most singers want to get loud, they strain their throat muscles, which thins out the sound. Teddy pushed entirely from his lower diaphragm, which is where every singer's supposed to push from. Mm-hmm. He could stand 3 feet back from a Neumann U87 microphone, which is
That's what we use. Yeah.
You know, and still he could overload the preamp if the engineer didn't pad it correctly.
That's industrial grade lung capacity, Max. And what about that controlled vocal distortion?
What about it?
That signature gravelly rasp wasn't the sound of a damaged vocal cord.
Hell no.
No. It was a highly calibrated placement of air passing over his false vocal cords. He could switch that grit filter on mid-phrase to create an immediate sense of emotional desperation.
And let's talk about that seamless gear shift. He'd be down there rumbling in his deep baritone chest resonance, and then boom, he'd blast straight up into an intense ringing head voice belt without losing the masculine weight of his tone. You hear it in the climax that closed the door. It wasn't a light, airy falsetto. It was a high-stakes, red-lined belt that made you feel like the whole building was about to burst at the seams.
And this is why it became the Sigma Sound blueprint, Max.
Right.
Between 1972 and 1975, Teddy became the definitive voice for Gamble and Huff's Philadelphia International Records. His gritty, church-derived baritone anchored masterpieces like If You Don't Know Me By Now and The Love I Lost. And
I love both those songs.
My favorite is Bad Luck.
Yeah, they're all great songs. Let's face that.
That's what you got.
But he took Gamble and Huff's lush orchestral symphonic specs and grounded them with a raw concrete street gravel. They hadn't heard that before. Gamble and Huff had built a gorgeous gilded palace of sound. The lush MFSB orchestra, the cascading violins, the pristine horns.
But a palace that pretty can float away into pure pop if it doesn't have an anchor, soul fam. And Teddy was that anchor.
Oh, he certainly was, Mello. Teddy used a conversational pacing, like the preacher's cadence that he'd learned from the storefront churches of Philly. He'd talk to the listener, drop ad-libs, and wait for the perfect moment to drop his heavy vocal footprint into the track.
He was the contrast the label needed. He elevated the entire label's valuation, proving that Philly soul could be just as rugged and raw as anything come out of Stax or Detroit.
Yeah, Philly was on the map for sure, Mello. And we're going to duck out for a few. When we come back, we'll dig into more of Teddy Pendergrass's journey.
You're hanging with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, so stick around, y'all.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're on Architects of Soul, digging down on Teddy Pendergrass.
So, Max, we got to transition from the vocal booth to the front office because Teddy's business moves were just as surgical as his singing.
Yeah, by 1975, the group was one of the biggest hit-making machines on the planet. But behind the scenes, well, the internal scaffolding was completely giving away under the weight of financial and ego disparities.
The split between Teddy Pendergrass and Harold Melvin is a masterclass in industrial real estate friction, Max. It is the ultimate music business cautionary tale of what happens when one worker is providing 90% of the raw, heavy labor on the job site, but another man holds 100% of the deed to the company's name.
That's right. When Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff signed the group to Philadelphia International Records in 1972, the contract was legally structured with Harold Melvin as the sole owner of the Blue Notes corporate entity.
Vocally, Teddy was the absolute powerhouse driving the enterprise. His gritty, church-gained baritone was the lead voice on every single signature smash that built their empire. If you don't know me by now, The Love I Lost, Bad Luck, and Wake Up Everybody.
But Mello, despite the marquee voice that the fans were paying to hear, well, Teddy was being paid a flat weekly salary as an employee of Harold Melvin. He wasn't getting an equal split of the massive live touring gates or the merchandise revenue. Let's not even talk about the publishing.
And the street lore on the road grind was intense. While the group was pulling in top-dollar headlining fees, Teddy and the rest of the Blue Notes were reportedly still sharing basic hotel rooms and riding in a cramped station wagon while Harold Melvin was riding in a limousine and controlling the entire checkbook.
Yeah, that's not a good formula if you ask me. So as Teddy's star power grew, the fans and the radio DJs began to treat him like the undisputed frontman. Well, you know what that did.
Jealousy.
Immense internal tension with Harold Melvin, who had founded the group back in the 50s, and he viewed himself as the boss.
Well, the group bared his name, so I guess that...
Well.
So to appease Teddy and keep him from walking off the job site, the billing on the records was officially changed to Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes featuring Teddy Pendergrass, which is the longest name you will ever see on a record label of an artist.
Yeah, and Teddy didn't get a raise.
No.
But this compromise, though, it really backfired. It only highlighted the division, Mello. Teddy realized his name alone was carrying the financial value of the brand. In late 1975, Teddy walked into Harold's office with a direct business literate demand. He wanted an equal partnership, an official audit of the books, and a 50-50 split of the group's income.
And Harold Melvin, fiercely protective of his historic deed, flatly refused to give up his corporate control, Max. He essentially told Teddy that the Blue Notes existed long before him and they would exist after him.
Well, surprise! Realizing that he'd never owned the land he was building on, Teddy officially resigned from the group in 1975, taking a massive career risk to establish his own independent firm.
Right, he did, Max. Teddy looked at the ledger and realized there was a major zoning error. He was doing 90% of the vocal heavy lifting on hits like The Love I Lost, but Harold was controlling 100% of the deed. So the split between Teddy Pendergrass and Harold Melvin is a masterclass in industrial real estate friction.
This is how it works, man. You know, people don't share. They want it all. Mm-hmm. It's the ultimate music business cautionary tale of what happens when one worker is providing 90% of that raw, heavy labor, like we said, and another man, he's got 100% of that complete deed to the company, Mello. That's some fucked up shit.
Teddy had the business literacy to demand equal billing and a fair audit of the financial distribution.
He certainly did.
When Melvin refused, Teddy didn't hesitate. He walked completely away from the frame. That's a massive risk for a young artist, but he knew his worth as an asset.
And the risk paid off in a historic way, Mello. He signed directly with Philadelphia International as a solo act and achieved an unprecedented industrial record.
Teddy Pendergrass became the first black male solo artist in music history to score 5 consecutive platinum albums between 1977 and 1981.
Badass. But first, when Teddy walked away from Harold Melvin in 1975 to become a sole proprietor, soul fan, there was an issue.
When Teddy decided to step away from Harold Melvin in 1975 to become a solo artist or the sole proprietor, CBS executives were terrified of losing their star asset.
Oh, they surely were, Mello. They were truly terrified. So to protect their investment, a legendary CBS executive named Goddard Lieberson personally reached out to Shep Gordon, who was famous in the rock world for managing extreme acts like Alice Cooper and Blondie, and asked him to go to Philly to audit Teddy as a potential client. And the onboarding process unfolded in a cinematic sequence of events, Mello.
So he said, okay, and Shep Gordon traveled down to Philadelphia to check out the live show, Max.
Yeah, like a ho-hum.
Now, apparently he wasn't entirely sold on the performance, but he recognized that Teddy's vocal material was a once-in-a-generation power plant.
So after the concert, Shep walked backstage to meet Teddy. Well, when he opened the door and he saw a massive traditional line of old-school East Coast managers standing there waiting to pitch the corporate deals to Teddy, he was like,
Despising the cattle call environment, Shep refused to wait in line to tell Teddy how cool he was. Yeah. So he just turned around and walked out of the building and went straight back home without saying a single word to the singer.
And when CBS executives found out Shep skipped the meeting, well, they begged him to go back. This time, an exclusive appointment was set up at Teddy's penthouse apartment.
When Shep walked inside, he looked at this hyper-masculine, larger-than-life R&B star and decided to bypass all standard corporate fluff. He laid down a raw, un-quantized business blueprint.
He did. Shep told him, I'm not going to waste your time. There are very few things I know in life, but I'll tell you what I can do. I can get higher than you. I can get more beautiful women than you, and I can get drunker than you. And when you collapse at the end of the night with the cash from the show in your pocket, well, I'll still be standing up to make sure nobody robs you.
Well, Teddy sat back, stunned by the audacity of the pitch, and asked, what? Shep issued a direct challenge. Why don't you meet me somewhere, bring the best drugs you have, and let's see what happens. If you're standing at the end of it, you don't need me. If I'm standing, you need me.
Well, Mello, Teddy said to Shep, okay, challenge accepted. So they proceeded to lock themselves away for a legendary 3-day marathon session fueled by premium substances, alcohol, and constant traffic. It was a chaotic, high-stakes test of physical and mental endurance. And on the third day, they rested.
Yes, old fam, Teddy completely collapsed from exhaustion. Remember, y'all, it's the 70s.
Yeah, the 70s.
So Teddy opened his eyes, looked up, and saw Shep Gordon still fully conscious, standing over him, completely alert and keeping watch.
That's right, like a vanguard, Mello, and he a slumbering, vulnerable prize. Man, Shep must have loved that moment. Teddy looked up at him and realized that if this wild rock and roll manager could out-party him and still maintain the mental presence of mind to guard the room, well, he was exactly the general contractor needed to protect his solo financial deed. And on that day, they shook hands. They went on to work together for over 30 years, and they never signed a single written contract.
Pretty amazing but insane story.
Absolutely
Max.
Out of control, Mello.
Yeah, that answers the why CBS was nervous question.
I would say.
When Teddy walked away from Harold Melvin in 1975, the industry gatekeepers were skeptical.
And any time an artist goes solo, there is that question. They wondered if Teddy could maintain his massive commercial torque without the established Blue Notes brand attached to his name.
He dropped his self-titled solo debut, Teddy Pendergrass, in 1977 on Philadelphia International Records. It was an instant platinum skyscraper, proving his vocal materials were indestructible on their own.
But Mello, despite selling millions of records, his live touring infrastructure was still being booked like a standard R&B review act. He was sharing multi-artist bills in a massive cold sports arenas where the sound quality was pure and the audience intimacy was just completely lost.
Recognizing that Teddy needed a unique solo lifestyle brand, Shep Gordon executed a brilliant piece of cross-market engineering in 1978 during the tour for his second platinum album, Life is a Song Worth Singing.
So Shep ran a data check on exactly who was purchasing vinyl records. And you know what the data revealed, Mello? The data revealed a massive layout. It did. It was overwhelmingly women buying the LPs, but the crowd at the sports arena were heavily mixed because men were coming along as dates, not a good pair.
No. And Shep noticed that the men in the audience were often tense or uncomfortable because their partners were reacting so intensely to Teddy's hyper-masculine, sensual stage presence. The energy in the room was clashing.
So Shep went to Teddy with a radical blueprint. He looked at Teddy's demographic data and told him, men don't want to see you because their girlfriends are looking at you too hard. Let's block those men out. We'll completely eliminate the friction. We're going to zone these concerts for ladies only. Shep was brilliant. He had the strategic mind to conceptualize, zone, and execute these midnight ladies only tours, changing him from a standard R&B singer into a high-end premium lifestyle brand and an international sex symbol.
And they officially launched the For Ladies Only Midnight Concerts in 1978, Max. They moved the shows out of cold arenas and into intimate, high-end theaters, scheduled them for midnight, and handed out white chocolate at the doors, and completely blocked men from buying tickets.
Bet they did. This was a massive corporate scandal. Massive. That turned Teddy into an untouchable solo institution and a major moneymaker. That was pure marketing genius. They looked at the demographic data, who was buying the records, and built a curated ecosystem. It's badass. They held the shows at midnight. They handed out the white chocolates and adjusted the lighting and sonic frequencies specifically for an intense, intimate experience.
I remember that when that tour happened. I was a teenager, but I remember that being a big thing. And Ted transformed the R&B singer from a performer into a premium lifestyle asset. He became the ultimate international sex symbol, completely rewriting the book on how black male artists could command a fan base and control their own branding.
A pretty badass motherfucker, right?
Badass.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk the structural collapse and the Live Aid reconstruction. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Stick around.
Thanks for tuning into Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you. Hey, we're entering the final stretch of this audit, but before we drop the next brick, if you like the content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel.
And don't forget to check out the video version on their YouTube page to see the full layout of the job site.
That's right. So, Mello, Teddy Pendergrass wasn't just riding high. He was moving at a pace that was redlining the entire industry's engine. By 1982, Teddy had achieved an unprecedented run of 5 consecutive platinum solo albums. Badass. Mm-hmm. He was the undisputed king of urban contemporary music. However, the sheer pressure of holding up a global lifestyle brand was creating an intense pressure cooker environment.
Man, Max, Teddy was constantly under the gun to deliver his next major record. He was coming off the massive success of his 1981 album, It's Time for Love, and was in the middle of tracking some new blueprints.
But between the Midnight Ladies Only tours, intense studio tracking sessions, corporate obligations with Philly and the record company, and navigating his massive status as a global sex symbol, Teddy was running on pure adrenaline and exhaustion.
Now, Soul Fam, for anyone in Philly, the Lincoln Drive in Philadelphia is a notoriously dangerous, winding, historic 4-lane road that runs along the Wissahickon Creek. It is full of sharp, blind S-curves, narrow lanes, and zero room for error, even for an experienced driver.
And naturally, Mello, on the night of the accident, Teddy had been out attending a function in Philly. He was driving his prized possession, a custom-built dark green 1981 Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit.
Now, Teddy was not alone in the vehicle.
No, he was not.
He was driving with a passenger named Tanika Watson, a local nightclub performer he had met earlier that evening.
Now, there have been plenty of stories, but as we understand it, as Teddy was navigating the dark twisting S-curves of Lincoln Drive around 12:30 a.m., he realized suddenly that the luxury vehicle was not responding to his steering inputs. He hit the brakes, but the car failed to slow down.
The heavy Rolls-Royce crossed over into the oncoming lane, jumped the curb, slammed directly into a guardrail before spinning and crashing sideways into 2 large trees.
And the impact was so severe that the roof of the vehicle was completely smashed down into the passenger cabin, pinning Teddy beneath the steering column and the crushed dashboard.
And of course, because Teddy was a massive superstar, the media and the local authorities immediately assumed the crash was the result of some reckless late-night rock star behavior.
Oh, of course. Speculation ran rampant that drugs or alcohol were the primary catalyst for the wreck, Mello. However, when the official police and hospital records came back, they completely cleared Teddy's name. His blood alcohol level was 0, and there was no illegal substances in his system. He was stone cold sober.
A mechanical audit of the wreckage later revealed that the vehicle had suffered a critical catastrophic failure in the braking and steering mechanics, Max. The brake lines had completely ruptured, causing a total loss of hydraulic pressure on the winding road.
No, it took emergency crews nearly 45 minutes to carefully cut Teddy out of the crushed metal. And while his passenger escaped with minor cuts and bruises, Teddy had suffered a broken neck and severe spinal cord damage. The impact had crushed his 5th and 6th cervical vertebrae, instantly paralyzing him and leaving him a quadriplegic, paralyzed from the chest down at just 31 years old.
Yeah, the industry assumed that the building was permanently demolished, Max. Sometimes the machinery fails, but the internal framework has to hold. It took the jaws of life 45 minutes just to cut him out of that steel frame.
Yes, Mello. Teddy Pendergrass went into that night as the biggest solo superstar on the earth and woke up in a hospital bed paralyzed from the chest down.
But that's where the story changes from a tragedy to the ultimate masterclass in human resilience, Max. When he first came to his senses in that hospital bed, he suffered a total artistic and personal shock.
Indeed he did, Mello. I think anyone would. You see, Soul Fam, Teddy Pendergrass went from being a hyper-masculine, completely self-reliant sex symbol who commanded global stadiums to a man who couldn't scratch his own nose.
Dress himself or feed himself.
Oh, my God.
He was entirely dependent on others, Max, and the weight of that reality crushed him. And initially, Teddy did not want to live.
Well, hard not to understand how debilitating psychologically it was. Aside from the physical disability, which in his deepest moments of depression, he famously looked at his close friend and associate Hank Brinkley and wept, saying, "If I wanted to commit suicide, I couldn't even do that. Look at me. I can't move."
So, Max, when Teddy was released from the McGee Rehabilitation Hospital in Philadelphia, he moved back into his mansion. He was in a state of severe clinical depression. It surely wasn't looking good at that point.
No.
But there was a turning point, and in that moment, the exact moment, the internal scaffolding of his spirit caught hold, Max. It happened through a raw, solitary experiment in his room.
That's right, Soul Fam. Teddy was terrified that the physical trauma to his spine and diaphragm had completely destroyed his vocal cords. He was scared to even try to make a sound because if he tried to sing and nothing came out, he knew that it would be the absolute end of his sanity.
He knew that he couldn't physically move, but mentally he was trapped in a relentless silent loop in his head.
Oh, yes, sure.
Can I still sing, or is my life over?
Right? That's all he had.
Yeah. He couldn't stand the suspense anymore, but he refused to let the outside world or even his family see him fail if his voice was gone.
So Teddy used the only weapon he had left, his command voice, Mello. He called in his closest inner circle, specifically his mother, Ida, and his fiercely loyal bodyguard and technician, Hank Brinkley. And he told them, "I need everyone out. Set up the speakers, put a track on, and leave me completely alone in this room. Shut the door, guard the hallway, and do not let a single soul inside under any circumstances.
Now, to create that locked room isolation for a quadriplegic Max, it required human hands acting strictly on his blueprints. Hank Brinkley wheeled Teddy into the center of the private home studio space.
And then Hank walked over to the tape machine and queued up a custom reel-to-reel playback tape containing the instrumental tracks to Teddy's old hits. It's often cited that it was the backing tracks from TP or the Teddy Pendergrass sessions.
Hank set the audio monitor levels, hit the playback button, and instantly stepped out of the room. Then he closed the heavy studio doors from the outside and stood guard like a sentinel, Max. For Teddy, that door was as structurally locked as if he had an iron deadbolt. He was completely alone with his shadow and his music.
And with the tape running and the speakers pumping the lush Philadelphia strings into the empty room, Teddy faced his ultimate fear. Because his stomach muscles were paralyzed, Soul Family, he couldn't expand his lungs or brace his core the way he used to.
Indeed he did, Max. He had to figure out how to project his sound using only the tiny, unparalyzed muscles in his upper chest and neck. So he didn't try to roar. He opened his mouth and tried to match the key of the track first.
So Teddy steeled himself and gave it a try, Mello. The first few attempts were complete air, just dry, terrifying wheezes.
Right, but he didn't stop the session, Max.
No, he didn't.
He just kept pushing and manipulating his throat until a fragile, gravelly whisper broke through. It was rough, it was shaky, but the vocal DNA was still there.
And in that exact moment, Mello, Teddy realized that while the external machinery of his body had been severely damaged, the vocal generator, the unique God-given frequency that made him an architect, that was still completely intact. He realized his voice hadn't died in that car frame, Mello.
Once he accepted the fact that it wasn't over, Max, when he finally called Hank and his mother back into his room, they opened the door. Teddy looked at them and said, "I can still do this."
And once he realized he could still make sound, Soul Fam, 3 pillars reinforced his drive to keep pushing forward. Number 1 was his mother. Ida Pendergrass had raised Teddy as a single mother on the tough streets of North Philadelphia.
Right, Max. She was the one who had scrubbed the floors at Ciola's supper club while he practiced his drums in the dark. She looked at her son in that bed and essentially reminded him of their foundational bloodline. "We are not people who quit on the job site," she said.
Damn straight.
Her presence and relentless spiritual scaffolding refused to let him succumb to the dark.
And number 2, in the music business, when an asset gets damaged, labels usually write them off as a tax loss and walk away. But Teddy's team did the exact opposite, Mello. Shep Gordon didn't abandon the project. No, he stayed on as manager and vanguard, visiting the hospital constantly and keeping the business red tape off of Teddy's desk, reminding him of his evaluation.
Continuing in that spirit, Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff made it clear that whenever he was ready to sit back up to a microphone, the tracking room at Philly International was his.
And number 3, Asylum Records stepped up and offered him a brand new recording contract while he was still in physical rehab. They didn't see a tragedy. They saw an elite artist who was about to draft a legendary second act.
Teddy eventually came to a profound realization about his purpose, Max.
He did, Mello. He realized that if he hid away in his mansion for the rest of his life, the world would only remember the crash. The entire music industry assumed that the monument was permanently demolished. How do you sing with that kind of physical devastation when your entire vocal technique was built on abdominal power? But that is where Teddy showed us his spiritual scaffolding, using only his upper diaphragm muscles. Bad and hard, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. There and then, Teddy Pendergrass decided he wanted to prove to himself and to the music industry and to millions of disabled individuals globally that your disability does not dictate your ability.
Damn straight, Mello. He didn't want to be a figure of sympathy. No. He wanted to be a landmark of survival.
Teddy spent 3 grueling years in physical rehabilitation, relearning how to breathe and project sound using only his upper diaphragm muscles.
He did indeed, Mello. He adjusted his vocal specs to accommodate his lower lung volume, focused on a warmer, intimate register, and stepped right back onto the global stage at Live Aid on July 13th in 1985.
Showing the world that the building was still standing, Max, proving his indestructible internal infrastructure. Teddy Pendergrass made his triumphant return to the stage at the Live Aid concert at Philly's JFK Stadium. I remember that concert.
I do too. And return he did, Soul Fam, in front of a global audience of over 1.5 billion people. He was wheeled out by Ashford and Simpson. He sang In My Time. It remains one of the most emotionally powerful redrafts in live music history.
Because he no longer had the full lung capacity to scream or execute his signature high-octane roars, Max, Teddy had to change his sonic materials. He leaned into a deeper, warmer, more intimate whisper and lower register controls.
Teddy proved that a master architect doesn't stop building just because the exterior frame changes. He redrafted his sound and went right back into the studio to score a #1 smash with Joy in 1988. That was the ultimate lesson in resilience for the new vibe.
Gotta give it to TP, Max.
Oh, you have to.
He looked out at that stadium and sang In My Time, adapting his new vocal specs. He didn't scream or execute his signature high-octane roars anymore because his lung capacity had changed. So he just leaned into a warmer, deeper, more intimate whisper and low-register control and blew everyone away, man.
Yeah, blew everyone away. Indeed, he did, Mello. I mean, he could still sing. He had one thing left to prove. Go back out on the road and perform. Wow, that's a staggering goal for Teddy.
But a goal it was, and he absolutely did want to travel and perform, Max. But it took him a long time to get the logistics and his own confidence aligned. And for years after Live Aid, Teddy was exclusively a studio contractor. He released hit records like Joy in '88, but he did not tour, Max. The physical and logistical complexity of taking a quadriplegic artist out on a multi-city live tour felt like an impossible blueprint.
Well, it was impossible to say, so. But Teddy was persistent. He had a personal, unfulfilled specification. He wanted to prove he could do a full headline-length concert again on his own terms. Man, that's a huge ask, Mello, truly.
Yes, it's quite a goal at the minimum. But Teddy was determined, and the return to touring happened in two distinct structural phases.
Right, Mello. Phase one, secure the scaffolding. 14 years after his accident, well, Teddy decided to test his physical stamina on the road. In 1996, he joined a 22-city national tour for a gospel musical play called Your Arms Are Too Short to Box with God.
He wasn't doing the full 2-hour set yet. The first test, Max, he would be wheeled out to perform just a single powerhouse song per night.
Must have been a pretty awesome sight, Mello. The response from the crowd was seismic, and more importantly, it proved to Teddy that his upper diaphragm could handle the pressure of consecutive travel dates, while the structural test had surely been passed.
Next step, Soul Fam. In 2001, 19 years after the crash, Teddy decided that the foundation was fully cured. He was ready for a full-scale headlining solo tour.
That's right. He certainly was going to do it, Mello. First thing, build the TP2 comeback band. He hired an elite 3-time Emmy-winning musical director from Philly named Bill Jolly to assemble a brand new backing band called TP2.
He kicked off the tour on Memorial Day 2001 with back-to-back completely sold-out shows at the Hilton in Atlantic City. This wasn't a brief appearance, Max.
No, Mello, it was a show. Teddy was on stage leading the architecture for a full 90-minute sets, tearing through Love TKO, Close the Door, and Joy. Man, he went on a full-scale national tour selling out the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles, the Paramount Theater in Oakland, and major venues here in New York.
In fact, Max, his Valentine's Day 2002 show at the Wiltern Theater was so pristine, it was tracked, mixed, and released as a live DVD and album titled From Teddy with Love.
It's a tremendous accomplishment, Mello. Teddy toured successfully on his own terms until he officially announced his retirement from the music business in 2006. He proved to the entire global industry that his live performance brand was bulletproof, wheelchair or not.
Absolutely monumental story, Max.
Absolutely.
An unreal journey of an architect who refused to be stopped even when faced with the most dire of consequences.
This is truly an inspiring story of courage and determination. And soul. Teddy Pendergrass, Soul Fam, a true badass. Okay, we're going to take our last break and come back and put a cork in the bottle and toss it out to sea.
You're in the zone with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
That's right, don't go nowhere. And we're back on Architects of Soul. So, Mello, some story, huh?
Seriously, Max, no joke.
No joke.
And this has been a deeply inspiring audit. From the back of the stage on the drum kit, to the master class in vocal projection at Sigma Studios, to the historic platinum solo runs and the triumph of Live Aid.
Yes, Mello. Teddy Pendergrass taught us and our fellow musical peers that your past experiences, even the one hidden in the back like playing the drums, are actually the raw materials that reinforce your future success. He understood the 90% business, 10% music ratio. He protected his worth, and he refused to let a physical crisis dismantle his legacy. Badass.
Yeah, he kept his sound grounded, heavy, and real. He was the definitive steel frame of Philadelphia soul.
And he certainly proved that adversity can be overcome, a lesson for us all. And as always, we want to close with our final thought, and our hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.